Hey, Dr. Uppuluri, thanks for coming and doing the second part of this video where we're going to talk all about interviewing tips from your perspective as a successful pediatric applicant last year who matched. We're going to do sort of the same thing as the first time. Just going back into a quick introduction. I know I put this question in there. I was like, feel free, no pressure. I know you had a very, very successful year in my opinion. So do you want to elaborate just more on how the interviewing process was for you?
Yeah, I had 27. It was like a slow start. And then as the interview season went on, I got more. And I think, you start getting more towards the end because people start dropping out. So, you get other offers. I only went to 17 mainly because it was getting a little expensive to travel all the time. And I looked at the algorithm and like once you hit 15, started to plateau. So I gave myself a little bit of a wiggle room by going to 17. I canceled 10 of them, mainly because of region, too. There were places that I probably wouldn't have wanted to be in anyway. Yeah, that was why I canceled those.
Yeah, no, but that's amazing. Like that really just maximizes your chances. Going into sort of your first interview you mentioned was a couple of weeks after, but you mentioned you had a slow start. So anything you want to advise?
Yeah.
Because I know a lot of people start getting very, very nervous when they hear other people getting interviews and they haven't gotten it and they get very like worked up. So what's your best advice for that?
Well, I remember you and I were talking a lot during this whole thing and I kind of was pretty reserved about how much I shared with other people. Mm-hmm. And I know you were too. Everybody's different. So, people might need something different, but for me specifically, I really only needed like a couple people to talk to, and I wouldn't really ask anyone else how their process was going, because I think when that's my biggest advice is you can't compare your process to other people's. I remember you were getting interviews before I did, but because I was only talking to you, I actually didn't get too stressed out. Also, we were in different
we had different specialties, right? Exactly.
Yeah, so different specialties release interviews at different times is another thing. So
like the less you hear or the more you keep yourself to yourself and like your inner circle, the less stressed out you get. Keep your stress levels on a low, keep yourself happy and motivated.
Exactly.
You've gotten so far that there's no point to amp yourself up with stress at this point.
Looking back, I will say, I remember we talked about this. It was a different kind of stress.
Yes.
Just like exhausting in a different way, like very physically exhausting because you were traveling and also like being on for so long, like was it crashing because I was like talking to the other applicants and I was talking to residents and I was talking to the interviewers. It's a lot to go through, but overall it's really fun because, you don't have the stress of school and grades. That being said, if you're not getting interviews, the people that you should be talking to are your advisors and the administration, not the people going through this, because they have no idea. Like if one of my friends applying for peds was telling me that they didn't get any interviews, I don't know what I would have done to help them.
Right.
Like they're not the people to go to. Know who to talk to about your problems.
And school advisors, what you mentioned, I think that's the best place. So if any SG students are listening, like talk to your like coordinators, ask OCG, Office of Career Guidance.
OCG is helpful.
And then you said your interview season was mid-October to first week of Jan.
Yeah, I actually got my first interview offer like 2 days before I even went to the interview. I kind of rearranged my entire schedule and just went to it. You kind of have to be prepared to do last minute things. There were a few interviews. There was like a program that I really, really wanted to interview at, but they only offered me one date and I already had an interview that day. So I had to cancel that interview. And then it's a lot of last minute.
So much rearranging.
Yeah, so much rearranging.
Travel plans. I remember I would, buy all my tickets flexible because like a little bit extra money, but I would just do it in case something else came up. So in terms of just for pediatric applicants and pediatric interviews, what's your overall advice?
Like I said in the previous video, be yourself. Be kind to everyone that you meet on the interview trail. You never know who you're going to come across with. Like the co-applicants are going to help you get through the day, honestly. They are not your competition, especially in peds. People are nice to the people who aren't nice and friendly to the other co-applicants are so noticeable. Everybody notices those people. And you want to be good to these co-applicants because they might be your co-resident one day. everybody has a different agenda and for their own lives. So there's no guarantee that they're going to want this program as much as you want that.
Right.
So I'm just saying, be kind to everyone on the interview trail. Introduce yourself to everyone, even if they're not introducing themselves to you. Like, take the initiative to do that. Actually, I was at the program that I matched at. My PD was at the interview dinner, but I totally forgot how she looked. Just because I was so used to taking the initiative to go say hi to everyone, I just was myself with her without knowing she was the PD, actually.
Right.
Yeah, and it definitely took the edge off, because afterwards, when I figured it out in my mind that this was the PD that I'm sitting next to at this dinner, I was like, oh my God, now I'm so nervous.
Right.
You never know who the person is.
Never know.
Because the PD was very personable, and she just introduced herself with her first name. So that's why I didn't know.
Yeah, so I totally agree. I think being kind to everyone, regardless of the situation you're in, is just a good outlook on life in general, right?
Yeah, exactly. There were situations where I was at the grand rounds or the morning report, and I think this goes for most specialties. If you know the answer to a question, if they're going over a case, say it. Like, I know it can seem like you're coming off as a little bit competitive, or maybe even like a gunner.
Yeah, like a gunner.
Yeah, but say, like, you genuinely know the answer, and just say it. It's fine. You don't have to. I mean, if someone else is answering the question, don't interrupt them.
Right. I remember I had an interview. This was Mount Sinai in Manhattan, and they same thing. They were going through morning rounds, and like there was a question that came up, and they were like, oh, it's open to everybody, and I knew the answer in my head, and I was like, I personally got nervous, and that happens to me not that many times in my life where I'll get nervous to speak up, because I talk all the time, but I actually got nervous, and I was just like, oh, I know the answer, and by the time I convinced myself to say it, another student, like another applicant, had said it, and then everybody was just like, oh my God, like it's awesome. And I was just sitting there, and I was like, you know what, man? Note to self, regardless of what it is, just be yourself. If you're naturally shy, if you don't want to say it, that's fine. But if you're naturally someone to speak up, like, this is not the time to be shy. This is the time to speak up. So I had to tell myself that. It was like a mental note, like, just speak up, just be who you are,
Yeah, exactly. Be interactive. Act like you're there. Like you belong there, because that's what they want to see, if you can mesh well with everyone. So don't worry about what the other applicants might think of you.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice.
But do respect the other applicants if they have things to say.
Be kind.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see that you have, so Reddit was a go-to. And then I remember we prepped a little bit before interviews together.
Yeah, we did.
Ask you like sort of more PEDS questions. You would sort of focus on more FMIM questions with me. I remember we did that.
Yeah, so I only prepped with you, but I think we spent maybe like an hour every few days.
Yeah, every few days for a few weeks, I think we did.
Yeah, and I think that really helped me, because we really worked on our elevator pitch mostly, because that's going to be like a big thing. Yeah, because most people are going to say, so tell me about yourself.
Yes, I just wanted to highlight this for everybody, and this is regardless of whether you're PEDS and not every applicant, you must practice your elevator pitch. And I will mention this in my interview series I'm doing, is like you just mentioned, preparing one-on-one with somebody, like whether they're coaching you, whether it's a friend, and you're just going off generic questions. It's so important to actually prepare.
Especially with an elevator pitch for a residency interview, you need to like wrap it up and bring the point across back home to why you're here today. I talked about how all this led me to PEDS, and you talked about how all this led you to IM or FM.
Pitch.
So it's not just like any elevator pitch. You do need to make yourself a specific applicant.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think just adding on to that, when you're in your interviews and things like elevator pitch, and when you're prepping, always show yourself in a positive light. Like this is times for you to honestly brag about things you've done, show your strengths, show your skills, and talk about it descriptively. Show yourself in the best way possible, because it's honestly probably going to be the only chance you'll get to do it at that particular time with that particular program.
Exactly.
And every program counts. When you're making that rank list, having good, interviews makes every rank that much more solidified for you, and makes you that much more confident when it comes to match day. Yeah. So moving on to what were your most asked questions overall?
So this one I was asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years at every interview? Obviously not everyone knows the answer to this question, and that's totally fine. They just want to see, this is what I think is, I think they just want to see if you have any like goals and aspirations aside from becoming like a general pediatrician, or what do you want to do if you do general peds. I know I really want to do critical care. And I do want to do a fellowship. So yeah, the answer to that question was a little easier, but I also don't know if I want to do NICU, PICU, or EM.
Right.
So I told them that I'm still keeping my options open, but critical care is my like main interest in peds. But there's plenty of people who don't know, but they just want to know if you have like an idea, like if you like cards, maybe you're gonna do a few cards things, or if you can get put in touch with one of the peds cards people. So that was definitely one thing that was asked a lot. We talked about the tell me about yourself question that's asked at every interview.
Every single interview. I got so tired of thinking about myself nearing after 15th interview onward.
I know, I was getting tired too. Well, the other questions, there were a few where I was given an ethical situation.
Oh, interesting.
So I had like 4 interviews where I was given a piece of paper and I had to read about like an ethical situation. Usually it's about a problem with the parents, or like a problem with cultural differences and how you would address that. So you obviously don't need to have the right answer to all of these things, and there's no way to prep for this, but that's kind of where your natural qualities can take over here. And
so that's cool. So I hadn't heard about that, because I didn't have that in my FMI interviews. I mean, we had medical cases, but that's interesting. So you had a couple of peds specific interviews where that's asked ethical questions. That's
for peds specifically. I do think ethics is a big part of it.
So moving on to difficult questions, what were some of them? I know you put some here, but how did you really tackle these?
There was a question that stumped me. I would just pause and just check in with myself to think about it. It's okay. There are going to be difficult questions. What makes you a good fit for this specialty is really hard for anyone in any specialty, because you want to stand out, but you also want to make yourself look good, but you don't want to sound cocky. And it's a really fine, there's an art to answering this question. So that's something that you should definitely prepare for. Mm-hmm. But you're going to get difficult questions that you had no idea about, what you're going to answer. And you're just going to have to be super honest with them and just say that's a good question. Give me a couple seconds. I'll answer it. You don't have to say, give me a couple seconds, but you can say that's a good question.
I said that. I'd be like, oh, that's a really good question. I just need a second to think about my answer here. Yeah. And I don't think that's a problem. Take a second. They're human, right? They want to stump you on some of these and see how you react.
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. So moving on in terms of interview days itself. So sort of give us a rundown of how your interview days mostly went.
So interview days are long, and they're all pretty much the same. You go to a morning round, you have an introduction, you go on a tour, you have interviews, and then you have a lunch, and it's pretty mundane after a while. And most hospitals look the same, but some hospitals are not, there's a lot of things that you can't see that are going to be different. The interaction with OBGYN was really important for me, especially with deliveries. Hospitals that are really interactive with OBGYN, that's where you're going to get the most experience with difficult cases. So that was really important to me. Baby-friendly hospital means are the mothers encouraged to be with the baby after birth.
Right.
That's really important to me, because I didn't want to work at a hospital where they were just sent to the nursery and there was no interaction with the mom. And what kinds of cases get sent out of the hospital. This is really important, because I want experience. I don't want to go to a place that's going to send out a kid for everything.
Right.
So my hospital specifically, they only send out burn victims.
Okay.
Everything else is
in-house.
That's a really good question to ask.
I'm glad that these were things that you asked during the tours, because I think a lot of people also don't know what to say during the tour. So everyone's going to have a different place where they're going to be the most talkative.
Right. Yeah. And having some questions to ask for the interviewers is really important to have. It would look a little odd to say I don't have any questions when they ask you if you do.
That's actually a red flag. I've heard from a few, just, you know, researching Reddit, for example. Like, I always, before going to interviews, I remember we sort of researched together. It was like, always ask a question. Like, when they say, do you have any questions? Don't say no. You must ask a question, because you want to seem like, you know, you're interested, and how else are you going to show that without you asking them more things? And again, there's a fine line. Like, you don't want to ask things that you heard during the tour, or that they literally talked about during morning, like, you know, introductions, or things that you can find on their website. You want to ask things outside of those resources, because you want to have done the research.
Yeah, and actually, I think a lot of people shy away from asking the interviewers questions about themselves, because they're maybe much older than them, or like, you know, they're an authoritative figure.
Right.
But I asked every interviewer, like, what brought you to this hospital?
Right.
And
I ask personal questions too.
Yeah, I asked them, like, how do you like living in this area? Is like, especially if they weren't from the area originally.
Right.
It's not offensive. It's not intrusive. They're
getting to know the person.
Yeah, and there were some interviewers who just didn't ask me any questions about myself, and just said, do you have any questions for me? And that was it.
I had a few of those. It all depended on me and how I wanted to take the interview and what I wanted to talk about.
Exactly. So you kind of, you have to be prepared for 20 minutes of that, of you just asking questions, but also trying to like show them who you are too. Somehow.
It's actually an art. Interviewing is an art. And I think as you keep going through interviews, you do get better. Again, that really does depend on a lot of factors, like, you know, like how many interviews you got, where you're going, sort of thing. But eventually people do get better with time. I know I did. I mean, by the end, I was like, I can sell anything. Like,
exactly. I mean, there was one interview with my last one, and she just asked me if I had any questions for her. And then, by like, it was like 10 minutes in, I like kind of exhausted my questions. I kind of like told her everything I could about myself. And then I finally said, do you have any questions for me?
Yeah.
And it worked. She asked me.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So.
And that's not a bad thing. Like, you can ask them that too, you know?
Yeah.
And I agree with you here on the second part, is that when you meet residents, like chief residents especially, asking for emails is a good thing to sort of follow up, and if you need questions answered.
Program that I matched at, one of the residents gave us her number, and I just reached out to her after the fellowship match. That's just awesome. To see like what were the programs that the residents matched into, because that was an important part of deciding where I ranked.
That's a really good idea.
Yeah, so that it's helpful to have their emails and numbers.
And then what about PD communication?
Yeah, and I think this is universal. Just thank them for an interview after, and then if they're part of your top 3 or top 5, just email them another one in January. I didn't specifically say to my number 2, 3, 4, or 5 that I was ranking them number 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right. No, and I would advise against that too.
Right.
Yeah.
But I still emailed all of them saying that, you know, I'm still thinking highly of your program.
Right. And I had a video series on just emailing etiquette, and I think it's important for people to know that it's not the best idea to tell everybody in your top 5 that you're ranking them first. I think that
it's very disrespectful.
Creditable. Exactly.
I don't know if it's a myth that PDs talk to each other. I have no idea, but you just never know.
Yeah, you never know.
The medical world is very small.
Yeah.
It's very, very small, especially if you're applying to places in the Northeast.
Yes, I agree. So in terms of pre-interview communication, did you reach out personally to programs before you applied or before interview season?
I did email some programs that I was interested in.
Okay.
And which was really helpful. Some of them did give me interviews just because I emailed them.
Awesome.
So don't be afraid of doing that.
Okay.
There were a few programs where the PD was like, don't email us.
Yes.
We don't need love letters. Right. I actually didn't email the program that I matched at after the interview because the PD specifically said, this is not going to change. Yeah, and I mean, emails don't hurt, but I don't think they're tricking you.
Yeah, exactly.
But I did email them in January. I think the January email for your
letter of intent email.
I think that the letter of intent is necessary.
I agree.
But the email right after might not be if they say no.
Right. Like a follow-up just after your interview is not necessary if they say no, but letter of intent should definitely send.
Right. So with that being said, though, I said thank anyone who gave you an interview, even if you didn't enjoy that program. This is just like, if they didn't say don't email us, it's just common courtesy.
Definitely. Awesome. And is there anything else that you'd like to add that you're, remembering right now in terms of PEDS applicants and interviews?
Yeah. So I think ranking is a really tough part of this whole thing. It's probably the toughest part. It could be applicable to like any specialty, but for PEDS specifically, if you're looking for a fellowship to do after, go to a program that has a history of matching into strong fellowship programs. Okay. It's really important. I really went with my gut. I really thought that I was going to end up back in DC where my parents live. Mm-hmm. For a long time, that was what I wanted. But then I went to my interview in Chicago and I loved the program. I really was looking for a program where like the PD was personable and was really close with the residents, because coming from SGU, like I said, as another face in the crowd, I didn't want to be another face in the crowd in my residency program. I wanted to be taken care of, and especially because I was going to go through match one more time with fellowship.
Right.
So, go with your gut and go with how well the residents interact with the attendings and the board of directors.
That's really good advice, and ranking is so important. It's so important. People need to really take time. I mean, throughout, like, I remember you and I talked about this during interview season, but we both sort of had ranks going throughout the interview. Yes. And then we just sort of adjust it every time after we had an interview with the program until we sort of finally got to that, final golden list that we had.
Yeah, I think a lot of people say like journal right after the interview, or like record yourself talking about the interview right after, because it's really hard to, like, things get really jumbled in your head. I did talk about it with you after interviews, but ranking right after the interview really helped me, like right after, like with just immediate thoughts, because that's your truest thought, right?
Right.
Every residency program has the same requirements by ACGME.
Yeah.
Right? So it's hard to differentiate.
It's going to be the people that stand out to you from the program. That's definitely what, like, I went a lot for my ranking list. I really, really emphasized on how I felt during the interview, how I interacted with people, what people asked of me, like, did I feel included? Could I blend in with the culture and the atmosphere? Very, very dependent on how you are as a person. That's why you should always think about things you like and don't like during an interview, and don't be afraid if you don't like something. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. You really need to find a place that you're gonna call home.
Right. You want to fit in somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where, like, going with your gut and like knowing who you are and what you need.
That's awesome. Thank you so much again. Just as we said in the last video, if anybody needs extra help or tips or, PEDS specific questions, definitely reach out and I'll forward them to Dr. Uppuluri, and they can probably reach out to you. So much for giving all your advice and tips and doing this for us. I hope this really helps people. I think people will be very grateful for this, because I think if we had this when we were applying, I would have sat there on my computer watching these for hours.
I would have too, definitely. Like helping other people out who have been through the process. I think this is going to be great for other people. So
I hope so too. That's the goal. But thank you so much. We'll definitely catch up later.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you. Bye.